there were 6 of us. Those are nice. We all really enjoyed getting together. It started out, it was like once every couple of years ago, we were going to get.
All right, hello everyone. We have more people in the hall than we have in the room. Okay. No, I'm sorry for I'm going to explain that. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Several announcements, and we'll get people coming, hopefully, from the hallway as well.
And tell them to pick one up that's new.
Yes. Yeah, so the handout is new. Now, the first part of it has the same material as at the end of last week's. But I gave you a fresh handout because there's more. We probably will not get through all of this today, but it's better to have too much than not enough, right? And again, several of my live streamers emailed me this week, and I sent you a copy of that from last week. Happy to email you this one as well if you'd like. There's some overlap at the beginning, but then there's new material at the end of this. Several announcements to make. Even as people are still coming in. One is, if you signed up to be at a Discovery Class table for the Thanksgiving luncheon on November 24th and have not paid, you can stop by the front office and pay there. It's all marked, Shannon's got it all marked out on tables. If you have not yet signed up and would like to be at a Discovery Class table, you can sign up there. They're marked. Just add your name and pay for that, for the 24th. Okay, do that. Also, Carol Ann, you want to say a word about the missions project?
Right. I promised Cody, she's out this week, but I promised Cody I'm passing this around. You know, she is so good about doing everything, and I mean she's like the Energizer Bunny. But she was going to need some more donations for the Thanksgiving basket. And I know it's hard for a lot of us to get out and do things like that. So if y'all can donate, Cody has the energy and the will and the godly
If you
spirit.
want to just give her money to do the food,
Yes.
Thanksgiving food, and you don't want to go buy it yourself, she'll do that.
That was much better said.
Okay.
Yes.
That's or you can do it yourself. Doesn't matter.
matter.
Also, another announcement. I had been. Well, Cody's not here today, so.
Well, you have an envelope to pass around, right?
Do you have an envelope?
Yes.
Oh, there's an envelope.
Yes.
There's an envelope going around.
Yes.
On a different note, some church members have given me something that they're looking for someone to use. The Tate Lecture Series at SMU is an excellent lecture series, and this Tuesday night there's an economist, Raj Chetty, who is the speaker, and I've got 2 tickets. If anyone is interested in that, would you see me after class for the Tate Lectures at SMU? Free, all right? There's that. I'm just back from Seattle. I was speaking this week at a conference there called Annual Conference of the Reformation Project, which is a network of folks who are LGBTQ inclusive and believe the Bible, and are trying to bring information to the church about how you can still believe the Bible and be inclusive. And it was a really good conference. There were about 500 people there, several hundred joining by live stream as well, and that was a good experience. What I wanted to tell you is on my flight back last night, I was sitting next to a young man, about 20 years old, who's Canadian. He's a student, actually a finance student in university, and was coming to Dallas for the weekend to see some friends. And interesting conversation. We were talkative, and I found out this is a young man who has never in his life been to church. Never in his life, other than through Boy Scouts for an occasional thing. Has no idea what really goes on in a church. And one of the questions he asked me, he kept asking me questions about how church operates. One of the questions he asked me was, where do you get your money? Who funds what you're doing? And I explained to him that we get no grants, that it's funded by the people in the church. And he was astonished at that, right? Just astonished at the miracle of it all. And that was a good reality check for me. It is a miracle. It is amazing, right? It actually is amazing that that the church is able to exist with that. And it's always a reality check when we are reminded that other people have different life experiences than we do, and don't understand the things that we take for granted here as well. We have a number of things to talk about when we get to our prayer concerns later, but let me just say, John, Eric, and Shannon are not here this morning because Sailor is in the hospital with a really severe case of RSV. It's this respiratory thing that is really going around in the little ones this fall. So do remember them this morning. I think Shannon said they're watching via live stream. So hello to y'all, but do remember that.
How long we love them.
Yes. Carol Ann says she loves you. On behalf of everyone.
We all do.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Wow. Anything else we need to talk about before we get to the lesson? I feel like I'm just an announcement board right now. Okay, so we're talking about religious pluralism. And if you weren't here last week, I didn't bring the handout from last week, but if anyone needs one, see Charlotte.
From last week.
Yeah, from last week. So we're picking up, and there's a little overlap on today's handout from last week's. We ended last week. I sort of whetted your appetite by talking about how it is that we learn about other cultures and religions. And I joked with you that for me, it was through National Geographic, Disney movies, and missionary speakers. Right? Did I say that last week?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And y'all said yes. You had the same experience with that. The world is very different today to us. The globalization of the economy and our cultures. We can drive just a short distance from this location and find ethnic communities and foods and stores that rival what we once would have just had to travel long distances. You go up on the south side of Richardson, and you're in an Asian community. Go to certain parts of Irving and Capel, and you're in another part of the world. You're in India, yeah, or Korea, part of it. Over West Dallas, you have historic black communities, yes, but you also now have Korean communities not far from where your office is, Paul.
Yeah, that area is called Little Korea now.
Little Korea over there, yeah. And, I mean, Dallas, right? If you understand the population of students in DISD, or even Richardson ISD, the number of ethnic groups served is staggering, right? And most of us in our little bubbles don't really understand this until we get out and start going around. Or if you're a teacher, you understand this, right? Because you're in those classrooms with students. It is a different world. I want to remind you, I've said this multiple times. I mean, I am someone who grew up in suburban Oklahoma City, primarily, in a place where I did not know a black person, I did not know a Jew, I knew one Catholic. That's where I've come from, right? And it was shocking to get out in the world and discover that was not normative. Right? It just happened to be true where I was. And so the world has come to us in a way. So our view used to be that we American and European Christians needed to keep on sending missionaries to the rest of the world to convert them to Christianity. This is what our whole Baptist missions enterprise has been about. And I'm not saying it's bad. We just need to understand the motivation of that. Now, the darkest side of this, the worst of it, led to a kind of colonialism, where we went in and exported not only Christianity but America, and sort of we know if you listen to us, we'll tell you how to do this better. And while that was certainly with Christian missions done with the purest of intent, I don't think there was any malice in that at all. There are some downsides to that as well. And here at home, as long as those other faith expressions remained over there and we didn't have to deal with them here, we could without thought label everyone else out there as unenlightened, in need of spiritual knowledge. And I think what many of our missionaries, even 30, 40, 50, 60, 75 years ago, in their honest moments would tell us is we have a lot to learn from other cultures as well. If you listen deeply to missionaries who came back, they often were changed. And it was not uncommon for missionaries to return to America, particularly missionary kids who'd grown up overseas, and have a real hard time acclimating into American culture because it was so foreign and insular to them. So all this is to say, it's gotten a lot harder to know who the heathen are today. Right? It's the labels are just not so clear on this. Jim?
From our standpoint, we were raised on the Great Commission.
Right.
Go ye and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the
All
Holy Spirit.
nations.
So, and yet we're also kind of considered we need to respect other cultures and other religions. But if we're following the Great Commission, and yet how can we respect other religions saying you've got to be wrong?
Right.
Because the Bible says we have to go out and
So
convert.
Jim, you just got into the very root of why we're having this conversation. This is it, right?
So what's the answer?
Well, we're not done with the lessons yet. We gotta wait.
Turn the page.
We're just digging up some roots right now, and we're planting some seeds. And
Are you gonna give us an answer?
Yeah, you know the answer.
so a wise old preacher once told me when I was in seminary, he said, Mark, there are two kinds of preachers in the world. There are those who preach answers and those who preach questions. The best preachers preach questions, not answers. So,
Jim,
does that answer your question?
He answered the question with a question.
Yeah. Well, that's what Jesus did, right? He confounded people with that. Okay, so here is a quote pulled from this book that I've been reading. The question of plurality is deserving of serious theological debate. This must be so once we realize that other religions function in much the same way for their adherents as Christian faith does for Christians. That is, they all provide a matrix for responding to the mystery of existence in terms of a notion of transcendent reality and its consequent ramifications for shaping a meaningful life. That's a lot of big words.
Sure.
What he's saying is, if you stop and look at other religions, they are motivated by the same thing that we find in Christianity, and that is helping us understand the meaning of life, giving us some coherence to life. Now, this is something I've never been taught in a Baptist church, that other religions are offering to their adherents the same thing we seek in Christianity, which is some way of ordering our understanding of life. You could acknowledge that without agreeing with that system of ordering of life. It's like saying some people find community in a bowling league, some people find community in their neighborhood, some people find community in an exercise group at White Rock Lake, right? Those aren't bad things. They all are about the same purpose, in a sense. What Christianity has claimed is that, yes, we're that, but more. And we're the true, you get the full meal deal with Christianity, right? That's sort of been the motto that we've been raised with. And all I'm trying to do through these lessons is help make us think about that. I'm not trying to say that Christianity is not the way. That is not what I'm saying. But we need to carefully consider what are other religions offering that people find attractive. Why are there Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus? What is it that draws people into that system? And it would be interesting if they asked the same of us. What is it about Christianity that draws people there? Yes, Pat.
Talking about missionaries and other cultures reminds me of, Dwayne and I have friends that we was in tech with that were missionaries to Africa. And you always think of missionaries as going over there to do something and then come back home. They have settled in Africa, that's their home.
Right.
And it just seems,
They're now retired.
yeah, seems odd that that culture is theirs now.
They fully embedded
Yeah.
themselves, right? Right, yeah. Carolyn, you've had that life experience.
I did, and I did have a hard time adjusting when I came back to the States. I mean, it's been over 40 years, I'm still adjusting. But the thing is that really, really troubles me is that I really believe that Jesus is the only way to heaven.
Yes.
And I mean, yeah, I'm really devoutly hoping that the Muslims and some of the other groups, the Buddhists, all the other groups, well, I know they won't, but let me rephrase that, I don't know anything. Yes, but,
Much better.
I believe that some of them are not going to, but, and I would like for them to, but I really believe that Jesus is the only way. When we went over to Africa, the only religion these people had was the witch doctor. And, I mean, God knows, if the witch doctor didn't like you, you were just
Right.
screwed. So, and I think the thing about Christianity, and you said maybe people needed to ask us what was it about
Right.
Christianity, we preach that God is love. I mean, some of us do. Some of us preach that, you know, some of us
There's a
preach,
challenge.
yeah, some of us preach that God is hellfire and brimstone. But some of us preach that God is love, and that is real attractive to me because I look out, I watch the news, scares the crap out of me. I watch things on television, scare the crap out of me. But God is the only one who is really there for us and who loves us and who can make life bearable and who can make us able to make it through, because otherwise I would have been dead a good long while ago. So,
Yes. You reminded me of a quote I picked up this past week at the conference I was at. I was attending a session for, it's called Parents in Process, and it was for parents who have LGBTQ kids. And there was a panel conversation. And this particular woman was talking about a relative of hers, a blood relative who's just not accepting because of her hyper conservative Christianity. And she said of this relative, she's finally been able to say this: I feel sad for her because her image of God is so full of anger. I feel sad for her because her image of God is so full of anger. Right, and that gets to your point, Chad.
Don't you think too, and you grew up probably in this same era, like in what I grew up in, it was a core of fear. And you worked out of that core. How many conferences did you go to? Probably I was at the same one, where it would they would tell you everything wrong with the Latter-day Saints. And it was because they were, they would never say that, but it was almost like they were at this core of fear and they had to keep them away.
Right.
Where now, in more of the environment I'm in now is more of an accepting, like she was saying, where it's a core of love, and that's what bothers me about the more conservative side is it's this fear and ignorance that they work out.
Right. So the bottom line to this, here's one answer, Trish.
Good.
Write it down.
One answer. The more we live in fear of people who are not like us, the more isolated we become. Right? Go read Romeo and Juliet. Go watch West Side Story, which is essentially Romeo and Juliet. Right? Here are writ large the fear of another clan, right? The fear of, and yet there is something transcendent in that. And what the biggest thing I want to say out of all of this is there is a way to say Jesus is the way without telling everyone else they're bad people. Right, Linda?
Well, my hope is that Jesus, who can forgive heinous sins, can also forgive mistakes. And it seems to me that there's a veil between us and God, and it's not because God has put a barrier, it's because our minds are too small to understand the whole truth. And he has given periodically to different people throughout history a little pinhole in the curtain to where they can look in and they can see some of the truth. And that has been the basis of that religion. But because we're human beings and we don't like to say I don't know, the part we don't know we make up. And I think we do that.
Right, agreed.
And so I believe with my whole being, and I hope I'm right, that when we get to the other side of that curtain, we will see where we were right and where we were wrong, and how all the pieces fit together.
Thank you. I think that's beautiful. And to tie together what you said and what Chad was saying, I don't know of many people who are brought to Christian faith from another faith by fear and anger and hatred. So if nothing else, if we can embrace Christianity as a religion and a system, an understanding of love, we're going to do a lot better than if we declare hate, right? And a lot of Christianity, unfortunately, has been based in fear that leads to hate, that leads to exclusion, and so forth and so on, right? Yeah. Okay. Moving on. There is some value in pondering what unites religions and what it is that we have in common. That doesn't mean you have to accept all of them on equal terms or believe that all lead to the same place. It does help, however, to understand what all religions do for their adherents, which is to help order an understanding of the meaning of life and make visible the invisible and mysterious. There is something about all of us that we're wanting that, right? So, to the extent that all religions address a common felt need for transcendence, we come up with this fundamental question: are the non-Christian world religions part of the will of God, or are they deviations from the will of God? Now we're down to the bedrock on this, right? What we're ultimately asking is God to be found in any religion other than Christianity, or is every religion other than Christianity, or even some religions other than Christianity, outside the will of God? So, I'll tell you the traditional Christian answer to this question is all other religions are deviations from the will of God. God's only will is for Christianity to prevail. Which is an interesting thing to be challenged when you take a global perspective, because what percentage of the world is Christian? And if God really does want all people to be in relationship, Why is that so? Well, we pride ourselves on saying, because not all will be saved, and this is God's plan. You can get, the Calvinists have it a lot easier than us non-Calvinists at this point, right? Because you can declare sovereignty, and this is God's will. The rest of us sort of struggle with this, and it's easier not to struggle with that when you live in a dominant Christian culture, right?
Who invented religion, God or man? Makes, you know.
Now we're into a deep philosophical question, right? Yeah, is religion a social construct, or is it of God, right? You can be religious and not be a good person.
You can be religious and not believe in God.
Right, yeah, you can be, I mean, things that are not faith-based are religions, in a sense, right?
It reminds me of that song. Do you remember that song? I don't think it's Imperials, but it's like, I'm not religious, I just love the Lord.
Yeah, yeah, you just stated us, right? Okay. Yeah, that early contemporary Christian. Yeah, I'm not religious, I just love the Lord. Yeah, which that's a good sentiment, right?
Is that related to I love Jesus but I drink a bit?
The country song, yeah. Jim, you
that
look like
lady
you got it.
on Helen
Yeah.
that said, I love God but I love beer too. Or she's like some 80-year-old woman that.
That's more and more popular these days. Jim?
Definition of religion, I mean, some.
Okay, so what is the definition of
I
religion?
mean, because you think, what is, you hear sometimes the term religion being, you know, golfing is my religion or something, you know, so
Right.
it can mean various things. So
So a
what is it?
religion, I would say, is a system of belief that you order your life around and find some social construct with, right? Which does not say anything about Christianity or Judaism. A religion is a system of belief and life that you follow. Yes?
I sometimes say that religion is not only that, but is also a system of man's effort to find God.
Yeah.
Therefore, Christianity is not a religion. It is a story of God finding man.
I like that a lot, right? I think the word religion is too limiting in a way, and I think you explained that. Helen?
Well, I've always understood that the difference between Christianity and other religions is that God seeks us.
Right.
And in other religions, they're seeking their God, whatever that happens to be. They're trying to please and be good enough to reach that God, and ours reached out to us.
Okay. Caroline?
A lot of religions are all about us saving ourselves. I mean, we have to prove ourselves to Allah.
Right.
We have to prove
Right.
ourselves to Buddha. Even the Latter-day Saints, they have to wear those,
Right.
those clothing and other things, you know. And it's not about God saving us, it's about us saving ourselves.
So these things, if you couldn't hear Caroline, she's saying a lot of other religions teach that it's about us finding a way to save ourselves, to make ourselves good enough to be saved. And sadly, there are parts of Christianity that bought into that as well. But I think true Christianity does not, and that is an important difference. You guys are really sharp on all this. Yeah. Okay. The author of this book I've been reading notes that the default response to evaluating other religions is that, quote, they are at best pale reflections of something altogether more profound, namely the Christian revelation. So in other words, the idea is Christianity is the true faith, and any other religion is an imitation of that. It's a poor imitation of that. He goes on to say, those for whom Christian understanding has been decided and defined once and for all will measure any new information within its inherited frame of reference. So here's the challenge I want to give us. When we've been raised in the church, when we've been raised in a Christianized culture, it is very hard for us to separate that as a cultural understanding from any other way we see the world, right? So to grow up in a different place that is not the buckle of the Bible belt, is going to give you a different perspective. So I go back to the young man I sat next to on the plane last night, who exemplifies 24% of the population in North America today, right? They're called the nuns.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
They're N-O-N-E-S,
With
nuns.
a
They have no religious affiliation.
Yeah.
Some have abandoned religion, but many have never had a faith of any kind. So they're not Christian, they're not Muslim, they're not Buddhist. They just have nothing, right? They choose not to be associated. Were you going to say something about that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, it just seems like God really uses you. He has sat you beside several very interesting people that you've been able to witness.
It's the way it leads on the way in a bizarre system. It's life is always like that. I can tell you more stories from this week
That
too.
young man you sat by on the plane, what does he believe in? I mean, what does he look forward to?
Hockey?
He doesn't think about
Well-
the what happens later? How did it
So
come
back to
up
the-
that you were talking about?
He asked what kind of work I did. That's always the question I dread. Right? Yeah, just like, no, I don't want to talk about that. But
Well, back to the
yeah, I was actually working on this lesson on the plane.
which is good. So back to the definition of religion.
Yes.
He has some construct of the meaning of life. He probably doesn't give it a lot of thought.
Right.
Most.
He's also 20.
Yeah. And there are people who are, 3 times 20 who don't give a lot of thought to the meaning of life.
Right.
And, so their religion we would scoff at because, what they care about, what defines life for them seems really shallow to us. But that's what they know and that's what they have. That's where their minds are.
So either they've never been challenged to think about that,
Right.
or they've segmented their life in such a way that they choose not to think
Right.
about it.
Yeah.
It's both ways, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Linda?
Well, I was gonna say, you said that, somebody said that the other religions are a pale reflection of
Yes.
Christianity. Well, Paul said that our understanding of Christianity was seeing through a glass dimly, that we were a pale reflection of the truth.
Right. So those are really pale.
Yeah, but my thinking is we all need to realize
Translucent.
that our understanding of the real truth is small.
That's a good point of humility, right? That's a really good point of
Because
humility.
he's God and we're not.
Yeah.
And
All right, I want to move us forward a bit. I teased you last week with this quote from C.S. Lewis. And thanks to Allison for having found this and calling it to my attention. If you've read the Chronicles of Narnia series, the last book is called The Last Battle, the last book in the series. So this is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and all that. So in this last book, and by the way, it's an allegory, right? The whole Chronicles of Narnia series is an allegory, thinly veiled Christianity in a way, right? So in this last book, C.S. Lewis presents this character named Imeth, and the name has meaning because in Hebrew that word means truth, right? And Imeth is thrown into Aslan is the lion who's the Christ figure, right? So into Aslan's country through this doorway, right? And once he's there, he finds himself face to face with Aslan, who, again, the Christ figure. And Imeth, all his life in another country, has not worshipped Aslan, but has worshipped a god named Tash, T-A-S-H. So I want to read this, and we'll have story time now. So I went over much grass and many flowers, and among all kinds of wholesome and delectable trees, till lo, in a narrow place between two rocks, there came to meet me a great lion. The speed of him was like the ostrich, and his size was an elephant's. His hair was like pure gold, and the brightness of his eyes like gold that is liquid in the furnace. He was more terrible than the flaming mountain of Ligur, and in beauty he surpassed all that is in the world, even as the rose in bloom surpasses the dust of the desert. Then I fell at his feet and thought, surely this is the hour of death, for the lion who is worthy of all honor, will know that I have served Tash all my days and not him. Nevertheless, it is better to see the lion and die, and to be Tisroc of the world and live and not to have seen him. But the glorious one bent down his golden head and touched my forehead with his tongue and said, Son, thou art welcome. But I said, Alas, Lord, I am no son of thine, but the servant of Tash. He answered, Child, all the service thou hast done to Tash, I account as a service done to me. Then by reasons of my great desire for wisdom and understanding, I overcame my fear and questioned the glorious one and said, Lord, is it then true, as the ape said, that thou and Tash are one? The lion growled so that the earth shook, but his wrath was not against me, and said, It is false, not because he and I are one, but because we are opposites. I take to me the services which thou hast done to him. For I and he are of such different kinds that no service which is vile can be done to me, and none which is not vile can be done to him. Therefore, if any man swears by Tash and keeps his oath for the oath's sake, it is by me that he has truly sworn, though he know it not, and it is I who reward him. And if any man do a cruelty in my name, then, though he says the name Aslan, it is Tash whom he serves, and by Tash his deed is accepted. Dost thou understand, child? I said, Lord, thou knowest how much I understand. Sounds like the King James Bible, doesn't it? But I said also, for the truth constrained me, yet I have been seeking Tash all my days. Beloved, said the glorious one, unless thy desire had been for me, thou wouldst not have sought so long and so truly, for all find what they truly seek.
Wow.
Woo! C.S. Lewis, what have you done to us here? Right? We think of C.S. Lewis as a really orthodox Christian, right? And what he seems to be saying here is, if you read the thinly veiled allegory, a couple of odd things to us. One is that if Aslan is seen as the Christ figure, and Tash is seen as some other god that Emeth has been following, all good deeds done in pursuit of this other god are actually deeds done in the service of the true God, because such good things can only be done in that way. Well, that's interesting. So the Emeth asks, are you and Tash two different expressions of the same God? And Aslan says, no, absolutely not. But also this idea that anything that's done bad is not done in the service of Aslan or of Jesus, when you take the allegory. And I'm not quite sure what to make of this. This is a children's book, by the way.
Well, he wrote to very intelligent children, I think.
Right. I'm stunned by it.
So 2 things. This, actually, the whole of the Chronicles of Narnia has been a tremendous help to me in moving out of fundamentalism, which is pretty much where I was raised as well.
Right.
Because he, over and over, will present things like this and say, you know what, there's more than you've thought about. And thank heaven he was able to think further than most of us. His thoughts went further toward God than most of the rest of us. Which then circles us back around to our whole concept of hell. I mean, this is what turned me, I haven't even read The Great Divorce yet, into a person who thought, the nature and character of God suggests to me that there's got to be a purgatory. In fact, Lewis says,
Lewis believes in purgatory,
in a number of places, there has to be one, doesn't there? Because we're not ready to be in the presence of God. We're still far too unclean. And there are others who are seeking truth but have been seeking it in the wrong direction. And this will all be made right. So that's, this is great stuff. I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, and you point out, there's a reason we've done all this in sequence. Hell, heaven, demons,
is that here now?
No.
You go through a purgatory or after?
After, right?
Yeah.
And
Jim. Oh, you got two Jims.
So,
There you go, go ahead.
what is your purpose then of, I want to say, doing good, following and stuff? If you're not bettering yourself now or changing yourself now, and I'll say cleaning, is it cleaning sins, whatever, in essence, it sounds to me though that this part is a purgatory. You are trying to get better now. But
there's truth in that.
But that's not a Christian.
So I think the classic answer to that is both and.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, that you're striving now, but those who would adhere to a belief in a redemptive purgatory would, I think, and not to put words in your mouth, but
Go ahead.
the classic teaching is that in that case, and I think this was Lewis's belief, you go to get further cleaned up and ready to be fit for heaven.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
the nature of your heart as it leaves this place or is formed in this place will either continue to seek truth and move from this purgatory into a heaven, or will reject truth because it doesn't want to see anything other than itself as great, and never find truth and eventually be annihilated. I rather think. So yeah, it isn't yes. It's a yes answer here and there.
Right. So let me turn to Jim Hancock next.
You know, I think that we really are faced with the issue of learning from everybody else and to be open to learn from them. I have a first cousin who's Hindu, and I'm going to tell you, he speaks truth in many, many different ways. And we don't agree on all things, but I learn from him. And then I also think about Ron Reagan and the commercial that we see, Junior, and the commercials that we see on television of this growing religion called atheism.
Yeah.
And that's what he says it is.
Right.
Is it a faith religion or is it a faithless?
But yet it is a social construct that orders your view of the world, right?
It is.
So it is a religion.
It is a religion.
In a sense.
Atheism.
It just doesn't have a denominational headquarters.
Well, I think California may be this.
Yeah. Okay, this is only Jims may ask questions. So,
I am third. Okay. So we're saying that if you do things for Tosh, you're doing it for Aslan. That idea that if you're doing it for one religion, it's okay to the other.
And by the way, I have a lot of trouble with this.
And but and it makes sense as far as the right. You think this is God, and God is
right,
incorporating all, and yet the Bible in itself, as we know as Christianity, is so limited. When Moses went up to go get the tablets and he comes down and they're worshiping another god, all hell broke loose.
Right.
And then what about the prophets of Baal? And then Jesus even says, you only come to the Father but through me.
Right.
No one else.
We're getting there.
And so you've got all these. So our Bible and our Christianity says, no, not other gods. And yet this is saying, yeah, other gods too.
Well, I think what Lewis is actually saying is all good that is done in the world is done in service of the true God, even if you don't know the true God, right? Which is okay, but now if you're concerned about salvation, that's a different thing. Chad, we're done with Jims now. We're to Chad. Anyone else named Chad? Okay.
I was Googling while you were talking about the Tosh, and I didn't realize this. There was a comment that in the series, that's the only organized religion that's in the whole book, whole set of the books.
Yeah.
And so his thing was, maybe it's more of a comment on organized religion instead of the truth. And he actually kind of separated the two. And I'd never thought about that it's this man-made religion, and then you have the truth. And so his comment could have, that paragraph was more about a comment on organized religion.
Yeah, let me just quickly say before we go to Linda, that also in that segment, I didn't include this part, there is a question, there's a comment about a belief in something called Tashland. That would be a merger of Tash and Aslan. We get that because there are people around us today who want to say all religions are the same, all the same God, so it's Hindu, Buddha, Christian, right? It just hyphenated kind of deal. Linda.
Well, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. He also said, the Father and I are one. Okay, so does that mean that no man comes to the Father except by the Father? And does it matter whether you know that that's Jesus or not?
So I'm going to ask you to hold that thought because I've got a whole section on that very scripture that I thought we would get to today, but I think we won't. I want to wrap up with another literary quote, though, that I've got in your thing. I gave you a little Wikipedia discussion on Emeth and all that, all right? You can read that on your own. It talks about Tashland there. So I asked you last week if any of you had read the novel The Life of Pi, and several of you had. So in this novel, the author depicts this character, Pi, who is a youth who's attracted to three religions and who absorbs the impact of these traditions into his own development. His initial reaction, his initial love for this stems from the fact that he's born in a Hindu way of life. And as the author notes here, Pi's experience seems reminiscent of the sentiment expressed by the Islamic poet Rumi, that the lamps are many, but the light is one. It comes from beyond. Okay, let's say that again. Rumi, the Islamic poet, the lamps are many religions, but the light is one. It comes from beyond. So the novel gives us this image of Pi interacting with representative figures from each of these three religions. And he finds things he values in each of them. And then the author gives voice to the Pandit, who is the Hindu leader, who speaks the thing that all three religious leaders agree on. But he can't be a Hindu, a Christian, and a Muslim. It's impossible. He must choose. And that is how many a representative theologian for whatever tradition would see the matter. So think about this. We are easy to understand the exclusive nature of Christianity. But we fail to consider that most other religions don't think you can be all three of those things simultaneously either. Some are more integrated than others, but most religious expressions are exclusive in some way in saying that this is our system and you can't be synchronous with this, right? So syncretism is this idea of worshiping many gods. Jim Hancock.
The same thing is true within the Christian system, if you call it that. I have a friend who moved from Baptist life to Episcopalian life, and he expressed it to me. We're still in the same house, but we're in different rooms.
Within Christianity. Yeah.
And within Christianity.
Yeah, their rooms are a lot more elaborate than ours.
Yeah. They're a little more formal than we are, as a rule.
Yeah, more stained glass. Yes.
Have you heard of the book Holy Envy, Finding God in the Faith of Others?
No.
It's by Barbara Brown Taylor.
Oh, Barbara Brown Taylor, sure.
I just started it.
So what's the gist of that?
Well, she's teaching religion in a small liberal arts college in Georgia. And I think I've just started it, but I think she's saying she can't really teach each religion until she kind of embraces it and finds something she loves within each religion.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So while we are most accustomed to discussing the limits of pluralism from a Christian perspective, as I said, we've got to understand that most other faith traditions also have limits or boundaries. with that. So if a person cannot simultaneously be Hindu, Christian, and Muslim, is it still possible that in these unique tracts, adherents are inspired by the same capital T truth? And if it is the same, I'm not saying it is, I'm asking a question. Why do its multiple expressions require exclusivity? That's no answer for that today. I want to leave you with this image to think about. It's toward the bottom of this third page. One answer is to imagine you're going from Dallas to Houston. You could drive a car to get from here to there. You could ride on a bus. You could take an airplane to get from Dallas to Houston. But you cannot use all three modes of transportation at the same time. It is not possible to do. They're all getting you from point A to point B, but you can't use them at the same time. So there are those who would make the case, not a case I'm trying to make right now, but there are those who would make the case that religions are like that, leading from where we are to the same destination by different modes. And that is the reason you can't be all three simultaneously. Does that make sense? All right, so the traditional Christian view is that there is only one true mode of getting to God, one true means of getting to God, and all other means are not going to get you to Houston. They're going to take you to Waxahachie, right? Or you're going to crash. Or, they don't get there. They drop you off somewhere wrong. That is the idea behind this. So, okay, I got one more thing here. This is a natural dropping off point after this. Here is one last quote from Alan Race, the author of the book I've been reading. The first rule of interreligious dialogue is not to compare the best of one's religious heritage with the worst of others. It is a short step from religious ignorance to bigotry, antagonism, and even violence, as history shows. What we typically want to do is find the worst thing about some other religious group and compare our best to that, right? That's not fair. It's not even smart. But that's what we do to justify ourselves. So, a lot to think about here. I'm trying to stir the pot for you. Much to Trish's dismay, I'm not trying to give you an answer right now. I want you to think for yourself. I'm still thinking about this. It is challenging, but also very interesting. So next week, I promise, we will pick up with the passage from John 14, where Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And I encourage you, maybe go read all of John 14 this week, because that passage is set in a context that matters, right? We'll talk about that. Goodbye to our live streamers. Moving to prayer concerns. I know I've kept us a little bit late here. We're so glad that you joined us in Discovery class via live stream today, and we hope that you'll join us every Sunday when you're available. If it's possible for you to join us in person, we would love to meet you as well. We meet every Sunday morning, about 9:45, 9:50, in the parlor at Wilshire Baptist Church, 4316 Abrams Road here in Dallas. If you'd like to know more about Wilshire, visit our website at wilshirebc.org, or also check out our YouTube channel at Wilshire BC on YouTube.